Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. We are recording this seminar, which our partners have described as a World Café conversation. And this is the fourth of 6 of these webinars. They're transnational webinars. It's part of a European Commission program focused on promoting corporate social responsibility, not just in the private sector, but across the public and non-profit sectors, as well as the private sector. The focus of today's conversation is some practical considerations around implementing employee welfare plans. We talked in the last session about the principles of why having an employee welfare plan would be a good thing for any management team, to have a workforce that is committed and motivated and feels loyal to the organization. Today, we're looking at some of the practical considerations as to how you would do that. And then more widely tailoring corporate social responsibility programs. I think most of you know who I am. My name is Conor Patterson, and I'm a partner on this EU project under the auspices of WIN EU, a non-profit company based in the Irish Republic. And we're now going to hear from a local experienced practitioner who we know and we've been working with for many years, Deborah Loughran. And she's been a business advisor for probably now 20 years. And she's just going to share some of her thoughts with us as an introduction to then a conversation with 3 talking points that we will cover in roughly 45 minutes. So again, thank you everyone for taking the time to participate today. So we're just going to hear from Deborah now in a pre-recorded thought piece that she's put together for us. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank her for doing that.
Hi, my name is Deborah Loughran. I have been involved in advising private, public and non-profit sector organisations for almost 20 years. I have been a business owner-manager for almost 5 years. I want to briefly share my knowledge with you of employee welfare strategies that work as part of an organisation's commitment to corporate social responsibility. As a starting point, I think employee welfare strategies are most successful in maintaining a motivated and happy workforce if they are part of a wider organisational culture which commits it to playing an active, positive role in its host community and which welcomes openness, honesty and well-intentioned positive critique from its employees and indeed its customers. Employees, if they are truly treated as stakeholders in shaping and delivering an organisation's strategy, will just feel as if they are part of a larger project, of something bigger than what we would say just a job. They will bring more energy to their roles, they will seek to do their jobs better, and they will work to make the organisation as a whole better, because as it gets better, the satisfaction that they get from their work will increase and the rewards they will receive for their work will then become more attractive. Managers who are working on designing employee welfare plans, as well as doing so collaboratively with their employees, as discussed in the last seminar, should benchmark those welfare plans against what we would call best-in-class offers of other employees in their region and I suppose beyond, because that's what their employers will be doing. And if they can't do everything that the best in class does, They should be open with their employees as to why that is and how they might improve things, not just in the vague future, but within a set time frame. Because I believe that such openness has the potential to actually incentivise those staff to work towards the achievement of that objective, because the promise that it would deliver substantial rewards to them as well as to management and shareholders. When working with their employees on designing tailored CSR, corporate social responsibility, and employee welfare strategies, in my experience, managers will be most successful if they use what we call a design thinking approach. So at the start of the process, they should open their books, their strategy, their ambitions, I suppose the constraints that they have to deal with, to their workforce, who should be part of a joint working structure which has been set up with a mission agreed by both the employers and the employees to what we might call co-create. They should agree together on what they are, one, jointly trying to achieve, that is, what's their shared purpose, and define that mission in as much detail as possible from the outset. They should then brainstorm a range of methods to fulfil that objective, and in this, the creative input of the employees can yield proposals on ways of improving welfare that I believe managers might never have thought of. And this was often the case in my practice experience in those situations where particularly the organisation had maybe limited financial resources and the employees understood this. What in those cases employees had secured from their employers was a high level of flexibility and understanding from their managers in relation to the challenges they as workers had to face in managing, I suppose, the complexities of their lives in parallel with their jobs. And I'm thinking here about making it easy to attend things like medical and dental appointments, to fulfil commitments such as school pickups, caring for children or older relatives, being supportive in cases of illness or other worries. And responsive caring managers, in my experience, always secure loyalty in much greater proportion than they would otherwise do if they adopted a purely commercial, monetary or KPI, key performance indicator approach. This was for me particularly noticeable during times of crisis. In my view, the organisations which best survived the impact of the global pandemic, and indeed the global financial crisis a decade earlier, for example, were those that entered those unexpected times with strong reserves of loyalty built up in their workforce. In fact, for many businesses, it was this more than having substantial cash reserves that ensured their ultimate survival. I know of many such companies where employees, maybe reluctantly, but volunteered to take pay cuts, volunteered to work longer hours, and in many cases, particularly in vital public services, volunteered to put themselves at what we would call at risk. And what then determined organisation survival and ultimately reorientation and success beyond the crisis was that the acknowledgement of those sacrifices by managers, who ultimately rewarded that loyalty with greater support. And yes, in some cases this is financial, but so often it was non-financial. I know of one important NGO in particular which was faced with a potentially catastrophic loss of income in the period following the pandemic because of changes in the wider economy and in government policy. But rather than simply look at the financial challenge in the short term and take the ruthless, but what many would say relatively easy step of making maybe 2/3 of its staff redundant, which the financial position at that point suggested that it should do, the management board of that organisation adopted a long-term strategic view of the challenge. It concluded that the organisation's staff were in fact its greatest resource. Those staff were hugely invested in their own jobs and wanted their futures to be with that organisation. For that reason, the management board took the view that their employees would be highly committed to finding innovative routes to new sources of income and putting crisis solutions in place, the complexity of some of which would have even been beyond the understanding of the management board, because when you think of it, the managers were not doing the day-to-day complex work of those jobs. That management board actually took out a loan to give its staff 1 year's breathing space to find new sources of income and develop new productive roles. And their faith in that team was rewarded. That organisation is now more successful than it ever was. And the faith that its management board showed in its staff has been rewarded many, many times over in terms of more productive working practices. The lessons from this case is that an employee welfare package just isn't always about metrics such as holiday leave and overtime pay. The overriding and most crucial consideration for a workforce, I believe, is, does this management team have our backs? Does this management team have my back? Does this management team care about us and truly care about us? An organisation that truly cares about the welfare of its employees, not just at work, but in their outside lives as well, will, in my view, be the most successful.
Okay, I think that was a very insightful reflection from an experienced practitioner, and I was particularly struck by that last example. And I'm interested in examples that you might have as fellow practitioners from across the European Union. I suppose these are examples not just of good practice, but of hope. I took from what Deborah was saying to us in that recorded piece that ultimately what the management board of that organization gave to its employees was a sense of hope. And that is very important for employees to feel part of a bigger project, not to be in a divisive relationship with management, but to be part of the single aims and objectives, the single program of development that they both are committed to, management and employees, as part of an ecosystem within the organization. So we have 3 discussion points, and this is over to you. Are there examples of organizations in your region which have changed how they treat their employees since the global pandemic?
If I can start, I would like to tell you a story that I discovered yesterday here in the south of Italy, related to the motivation of the workers. There's a really Italian story that was told yesterday during a show, and it was a history of mafia victims. You know, the Italian criminality that is very famous all around the world. And there was this show where it was told the history of several victims, and one of them was an engineer that was working in maybe Sicily to the creation of a tunnel that was meant to connect 2 territories. I don't remember where and which exactly. So this important work was conducted by this engineer, and he was the mafia system in Sicily didn't want this work to be carried out, so they threatened and tried to stop this engineer, and they finally killed him. But he was so loved by the workers and was so respected that the workers of this tunnel finished the work volunteering. So it's not a history of social corporate social responsibility in a strict sense, but is a history of how human relation and respect and the sharing of objectives, a feeling so strong that the workers didn't take anything to finish the work in the memory of this engineer that was killed.
That's an incredible story. And I think that is social responsibility from people who are part of an organization. If we use the word organization or words organization and corporation interchangeably, they were part of that organization, the workers, and they showed responsibility and bravery in doing what they did as a symbolic act. That's a very powerful example. And perhaps as well, Fabio, you're making a wider point that CSR needs to be considered in a broader context, not just like it is in MBA courses at university.
Yes, hello. So I guess we will speak about the Galician region now. I mean, proper examples, we searched for them and we also thought about them, but we didn't came up with anything very special. So we would like to discuss a more general approach to the changes in the labor relationships before and after the pandemic. Technology involved in work now as for remote working. There is also an emphasis on employee well-being, being now the company is more likely to offer programs and resources to support employee well-being, such as stress management programs, access to childcare, etc. In this regard, there is a very important company in Galicia, the Estrella Galicia Beer Factory, which is a great place to work, actually. And they implemented a program called Your Health is the Star after the pandemic to take care of the mental well-being of their workers. Also, well, increased on flexibility and so on. So that's our input on the way the labor relationships have changed after the pandemic.
And that's a very interesting example, because the brewing industry is manufacturing. And I think some of us may have thought that relationships changing in ways that we've been discussing largely happened in the service sector and business services, in the academic world, in organizations employing what we call white-collar professionals. But actually, you've given an example of a company that's in a manufacturing sector. I know it has a very high profile, not just in Galicia, but more widely in Spain, and is branded very much as a regional brand in Galicia. So perhaps a company that perceives itself to be embedded in its region in the way that Estrella Galicia does, because that's part of its brand. Galicia is actually in its brand. Perhaps it's got a better focus on the well-being of the region, which includes the people in the region and crucially its employees. That's a really good example. Thank you.
Yes, to be honest, I think that the only change because of the pandemic crisis has to be with managers seems to be more flexible to allow the employees to work online. For me, is the only change because of the COVID. It's true that the managers, the companies are changing now because of the scarcity of professionals, such as artificial intelligence. But it's another reason. It's not because of the pandemic crisis.
Are there any examples from the group here in Ireland that we could share?
Hi, everybody. I'll maybe
Hello.
have some input. My name's Emma. I'm based here in a place called Downpatrick, which is County Down. This kind of topic area is right up my street, as I have a HR background. So I have been working with businesses probably for the last 20 years around culture, people, and trying to get continuous improvement really within their business through their people. So I certainly did see a lot of change within all industries, slightly before the pandemic, interestingly, but certainly then through the pandemic that accelerated in a lot of ways and in a lot of different ways. And it was about a lot of employers having to adjust and just to do things differently. And I think what changed is the dynamic in terms of the employer pretty much dictating how they do business to it being a employee then dictating actually this is how we want to do business. And unfortunately for some employers they had to adjust with that, otherwise they would have been left with no workforce. I think that there is a challenge for us as employers in terms of that leadership. So it's the leadership qualities that will be able to deliver on a lot of these things. So it's knowing what culture impacts can have in a business. It's knowing what the development plans are for individual employees. It's knowing how best to create a workforce, whether it be hybrid, remote working, whatever it may be. And it's the challenge on our leaders now within businesses. And I think that's the biggest challenge, I suppose, we face in terms of organizations just having to do something a little bit differently. But there's lots of organizations have done things really differently and they're reaping the benefits of it. But I think that has been a struggle. And I think that has been very, very, very difficult for them.
That's great, Emma. Thanks for that overview as well, you know, and I think it's interesting what you're saying that, you know, even 30, almost 40 years ago from research, while pay is always going to be important, actually it's about respect and feeling secure and those other variables that come before money that are what motivate people.
Hello, sorry for interrupting. If I may, I just wanted to add something for Tuscany concerning this, because in Tuscany there have been instances where employees made sacrifices to support their companies during the pandemic. And for example, the employees at the Cooperativa Sociale Il Girasole in Pisa, near Lucca, accepted temporary salary reductions and gave up annual bonuses to help the organization overcome the financial difficulties and crises caused by the reduction of activities during the lockdown. And another example could be Antico Settificio Fiorentino, a manufacturing company where workers decided to work fewer hours with reduced pay, allowing the company to continue operating without having a layoff on staff. So just wanted to point out this.
That's exactly what we were looking for, Alicia, which were you know, examples of employees making sacrifices as part of a bigger commitment to the salvation of the companies, the organizations that they work for. Does anybody have any other examples where employees volunteered? Yes. Hi.
Yeah, here in Galicia, we had like a similar measure. We call it ERTES. There are a record of temporary employment regulation, and a lot of companies use them. So they reduce the working hours of the employees during the COVID, and also they like put in enough their contracts, so then when they were in a better place in terms of the economy, they could work normal hours.
Thank you, colleagues from Italy and Spain, for those examples. Stephen, sorry to put you on the spot, but I was thinking about the health service on our island and how employees put themselves at risk and went way beyond just working hours to save their communities, literally the lives of their communities, and not just people in the health service, but people in non-profits trying to help, and people in the private sector likewise, all committing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the very positive thing that came out of COVID was the community cohesion and the community, certainly in Newry, Morning Down, and I think it was typical across the whole island of Ireland, was community organisations mobilised at a very grassroots level, and it was the only way that interventions like food interventions could get right to the people on the front line. And the local communities got together at the grassroots level and put the boots on the ground. And then the NGOs that were there coordinated the whole thing with local government and central government. The outcome of that was that post-pandemic, where previously government was very suspicious of the community and voluntary sector, we put it kindly, and always put a lot of barriers in the way of getting significant funding into community and voluntary organisations to get to the front line. Post-pandemic, the way that the community and voluntary sector responded during the pandemic provided government with reassurance that these people could be trusted to deliver large projects at grassroots level. And since the pandemic then, certainly in our own region, there has been almost £2 million worth of aid has been given with the help of the local council, has been given directly to community and voluntary organisations without public sector intermediaries, without all the extra conditions attached to it, because the pandemic allowed them to build up this trust and confidence in the community and voluntary sector to deliver. So that's one of the very positive outcomes of it.
That's a very interesting point. It's brought sectors together that perhaps hadn't historically worked well together, and the value of, as you say, what NGOs that bring social capital, not monetary value against it, but is beyond monetary value. It's actually very difficult to measure, but if the volunteer time were to have a monetary value against it, that would be an incredible investment that a government would need to make. I'm going to move to the final discussion point. That is just your thoughts about the future. Will we go back to old ways, do you think? Or has this shift, which in my view isn't just a shift that we can attribute to the pandemic, although that was hugely important, but it was already underway, in my view, a reorientation following the global financial crash and its impact on the security that employees felt or didn't feel, more to the point, and employers also feeling insecure and realizing that if they couldn't motivate their staff, their employees, they wouldn't have a future.
To Connor, if we can add something in line with what you are saying, the government also in Spain, and I guess in many countries also, I mean, I know in many countries also, has taken protective measures for all the people that live in the country. As an example, my colleague Adriana will tell you.
Like well, I think that the best improvement that the government did was the increment of the minimum wage, that it has incremented by 54% since 2017. Now we're seeing 1,100 euros more or less. And I think this is a great change for employees, because they have more decent wages for their work.
Yes. And also we have protection if you don't work anymore. We have assistance, financial assistance, and also legal assistance, and many other benefits to protect the population. So I guess that's also something to take into account about the future.
And if I can add something on that, I have a feeling of workers' trust, and therefore their will to feel involved and engage in the company's project risks to collapse due to the company's tendency to engage in a CSR policy, not out of a genuine belief, but as a marketing and profit-driven strategy. So I think it's more and more clear there's a tendency of apply welfare and social responsibility policies, not for the example of Gucci, like use slavery in an indirect way. So with their workers, they have these beautiful policies and so on, but with the indirect companies that they use to have their materials and to create clothes and bags and everything, they practically use slavery. So it's clear that the corporate social responsibility and welfare policies and sustainability matters are not believed, but they are only practiced because consumers asks for this, because the market is asking for social responsibility and sustainability. So it can finally empty the push of this movement and to become more formal than substantial. So I really think that corporate social responsibility must go hand by hand with government policies.
So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the 3rd of July. Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Connor, for your conduction.
Thank you.
Thank you.